What happens when a fierce journalist mocks faith only to be quietly disarmed by a young woman who doesn't fight back with anger, but with scripture grace and truth? This isn't just a debate. It's a collision of worldviews, a moment that silenced Harvard and a whisper that reached millions. And it all ends, not with a flame, but with a spark that refuses to go out. If this story made you feel something, if it stirred a memory, sparked a thought, or opened a question, don't scroll past it. Hit subscribe to follow stories that move deeper than politics. Leave a comment below. What does faith mean to you? And share this video with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes the softest voice in the room carries the strongest truth. The stage was set inside a grand wood-paneled auditorium on the campus of Harvard University, a place long revered as a cradle of American intellectualism. But today, that same room was bracing for something far more personal than academic, a nationwide event titled Faith and Freedom Dialogue in a Divided Age. It wasn't just a debate, it was a cultural litmus test being broadcast live across all major streaming platforms. Americans watching from their living rooms, church halls, and senior centers would soon witness not a shouting match, but something deeper, a collision of conviction. The atmosphere was electric but tense. On one side of the aisle sat students wearing red MAGA hats, their faces stern, expectant. On the other side, placards reading "Keep Religion Out" bobbed quietly above heads held by young progressives who viewed faith as a relic of a less enlightened past. The tension wasn't spoken, it was worn. On jackets, on expressions, on posture. Then came the voice that cut through the murmurs. Whoopi Goldberg, the evening's moderator, and a household name in American television for decades, stepped up to the center podium. Her tone was calm, measured, but carried the weight of national attention. Tonight, she began, isn't about scoring points. It's not about who's louder. It's about whether America can still listen. To her right sat Karoline Leavitt, the youngest former White House press secretary in history and a rising voice among conservative Christians. She wore a navy blue blazer, not flashy, not dull, just clean, firm, confident. Her right hand rested gently atop a worn leather Bible, the gold-edged pages slightly curled, like it had been used more than posed with. Her face was composed, her gaze steady, not defiant, but deeply rooted. To Whoopi's left sat Anna Kasparian, a sharp-tongued progressive journalist, known for her fierce critiques of organized religion and conservative politics. Anna leaned slightly forward, her arms crossed tightly, fingertips drumming on the table. Her expression wasn't hostile, but it wasn't welcoming either. Her presence alone sent a signal she came ready to confront. There were no musical intros, no dramatic lighting. Just two chairs, two voices, and a nation watching. The camera panned out slowly, showing the full divide in the crowd. Banners from conservative student groups like Young Americans for Freedom hung on one wall, while rainbow-colored flags and secular humanist group logos lined the other. The divide wasn't subtle. It was painted in red, blue, and gray. What made the moment even more striking wasn't the politics, it was the silence. There were no jeers, no chants, no protesters screaming from the parking lot. Just stillness, anticipation, as if everyone in the room understood that what was about to unfold wasn't just a university panel, it was a test of American identity. Whoopi glanced at both guests. She gave a brief nod, not of encouragement, but of recognition. This wasn't her first rodeo. She had moderated her share of polarizing conversations, but something about this one, something in the undercurrent, felt heavier, Let's begin with a question, she said. In today's America, can faith still guide public life without dividing it? The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a gauntlet, and everyone knew it. Karoline didn't answer right away. She simply exhaled, her eyes lowering for a moment to the Bible beneath her hand. Anna shifted in her seat, her gaze sharpening, clearly ready to strike. It hadn't even begun. And yet, in that Harvard hall, steeped in centuries of history, it already felt like the whole nation had entered the room. Because this wasn't just about faith. It was about which truth still gets to shape the future of America. And for many watching, especially those who remember when prayer still opened school days, and scripture was more than just a quote on a wall, this wasn't just interesting. It was personal. The silence didn't last long. No sooner had Whoopi asked her opening question than Anna Kasparian leaned forward. Her voice sharp enough to slice the tension like glass. Faith is a danger to reason, she declared without a hint of hesitation. Religion has no place in a university. It's just a fairy tale that shackles minds. The words landed like a brick through stained glass. The room erupted. Some students stood and applauded with fervor, others shouted in outrage. A few gasped, not because they disagreed, but because they sensed a line had been crossed. Not just a rhetorical line, but a moral one. The kind of line you don't erase with clever wordplay. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the chaos in 4K clarity. Red caps in the back row, shaking their heads. Secular students nodding proudly, some even smirking. The moderator's table suddenly felt like a fault line, and the earthquake had just begun. But the camera didn't stay on the crowd. It slowly panned back to Karoline Leavitt. Her face composed, her hand still resting on the Bible in front of her. She didn't flinch. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't look to the moderator for rescue. Instead, she breathed in quietly, calmly, like someone preparing not to fight, but to anchor. Her expression didn't reveal offense. It revealed resolve. Whoopi, sensing the stakes, gently leaned toward Karoline. Her voice, though even, carried a weight of urgency. "Karoline," she said, "would you like to respond?" Karoline didn't rush. She didn't posture. She simply nodded slowly, lifting her eyes to Anna, then to the audience. Her voice was low, almost soft, but unmistakably clear. "Faith never shackled me," she said. "It freed me from fear." A pause, then silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind that comes when truth enters a room, not yelling, not demanding, but standing its ground. She continued, "You call faith a fairy tale, but I call it the reason I get up every morning. It's not fiction. It's the foundation that gave me strength when my father lost his job, when my mother battled cancer, when I faced death threats just for saying I believe in life." She turned slightly toward the audience. "I didn't come to Harvard to win a debate. I came to tell you that faith isn't the enemy of reason. It's what gives reason purpose." The atmosphere shifted. Even those who disagreed felt something deeper stirring. Anna, arms crossed, gave a tight, dismissive smile, but something flickered in her eyes. Not agreement, but maybe respect. Or was it recognition that she hadn't shaken her opponent after all? Karoline went on. Her words measured like steps on sacred ground. "Religion doesn't belong in the university, you say, but it was religious belief that built Harvard. It was faith that launched the first hospitals, the first orphanages, the first movements to end slavery. We're sitting in a building paid for by people who believed in more than themselves." A few conservative students clapped softly, cautiously, like they didn't want to set off another explosion. But they couldn't help it. She wasn't just defending faith. She was defending memory, meaning history. Anna sat back, arms still folded, but her brow furrowed ever so slightly. Whoopi let the moment hang. She knew better than to interrupt gravity when it's in the room. Then, with perfect timing, Karoline finished her thought. Faith doesn't shackle minds. It anchors souls. That was it. No fanfare, no slogan, just 7 words that echoed louder than any applause. And somehow the auditorium, divided by ideology-age belief, sat still. Not because the fight was over, but because something real had just been said. And even those who rolled their eyes couldn't unhear it. Back in living rooms across America, people leaned forward in their chairs. For some, it was the first time they'd heard a young person defend faith, not with shouting, but with quiet fire. And in that moment, just for a moment, many watching felt what had been missing from public debate for too long. Not volume, not outrage, but courage. And that was only the beginning. The moment Karoline's words settled, faith doesn't shackle minds. It anchors souls. The auditorium at Harvard fell into a strange quiet. Not agreement, not defeat, just stillness. The kind that comes after a bell rings in church or a soldier folds a flag. And then just as quickly the quiet cracked. Anna Kasparian leaned back in her chair, arms still crossed, but her voice cutting forward like a blade through soft fabric. Faith justifies oppression, she snapped. It's been used to support slavery, to deny science, and to control women's bodies for centuries. You don't get to sanitize history with Bible verses. The room tensed again. Some students murmured in approval. Others grimaced. It was the moment where conviction became combat. Karoline didn't flinch. Her hand still rested calmly on the table, fingers curled loosely over her worn Bible. Her eyes didn't narrow, her shoulders didn't rise. She simply looked at Anna, and then passed her into the crowd, as if she was speaking not just to the person across from her, but to every person who had ever dismissed faith as a weapon instead of a well. True faith didn't justify slavery, she said. It exposed it. It was faith that stirred the hearts of abolitionists. It was scripture that Frederick Douglass quoted when he called America to conscience. Faith wasn't the hand that chained it, was the fire that broke the chains. The contrast was stark. Anna's voice had heat speed attack. Karoline's, it had weight. She didn't fight to dominate, she spoke to ground. And somehow her stillness was more disarming than anger ever could be. Anna chuckled coldly, her voice rising just enough to make sure the microphones caught every syllable. So now you're preaching in Harvard. She smirked, cute. Laughter rippled lightly through the progressive side of the room. A few students clapped. But it wasn't full applause. It was uneasy. As if even those who agreed with Anna knew she was dancing close to the edge of something raw. Karoline didn't blink. Her reply came soft but sharp as a chisel on stone. Truth doesn't need volume, she said. It just needs courage. It landed like a hammer. Not dramatic, not rehearsed, just honest. One student in the back row whispered to a friend, "She's winning without yelling." It wasn't a cheer, it was a realization. And at that moment the conflict took shape not just in words, but in style, in spirit, in tone. Anna was fire. Karoline was stillness. And the room was caught in the tension between both. Anna leaned forward again, voice growing louder. "You want to talk about women's rights? Let's talk about how faith is used to guilt them out of medical choices, shame them into silence, and push outdated morality into law books." Karoline didn't rush to answer. She let the accusation breathe, then stepped in like someone walking carefully across sacred ground. "I don't deny that religion has been misused, but that's the fault of people, not of God. People twist truth for power. But that doesn't mean truth ceases to exist. It just means we have to return to it." She paused, then looked directly at Anna. Faith doesn't silence women. I've met mothers, students, survivors, women who said their faith was the only thing that kept them alive. Their strength didn't come in spite of faith. It came because of it. This time, the crowd didn't erupt. They absorbed. Even some of the liberal students who'd earlier scoffed began to glance at each other, not because they were convinced, but because they couldn't deny the composure in front of them. Karoline wasn't preaching. She was witnessing. Whoopi Goldberg, sensing the momentum, didn't interrupt. She let it play out. And the viewers at home, especially the older Americans, watching on cable or live stream, could see what younger generations sometimes miss. Not every battle is won by force. Some are won by peace that refuses to move. Anna, clearly unsettled, but still combative, threw in one last jab. You know, Karoline, it's easy to quote Bible verses, but not everyone believes in your God. Karoline gave the faintest of smiles. Not smug, just human. And then she replied, I don't quote scripture to force belief. I quote it because it holds the truth that changed my life. I don't expect everyone to believe, but I won't apologize for living by the light I've seen. A murmur passed through the room again, softer this time, like the wind shifting. The clash wasn't over, but the momentum had changed. This wasn't about scoring applause. It wasn't about flipping votes. It was about something older than politics and deeper than talking points, the collision between a world that shouts for attention and a faith that whispers with strength. And in a divided Harvard Hall, on a stage where fire met stillness, millions watching at home knew one thing. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just defending religion. She was defending the right to believe. Quietly, firmly, and without shame. And the fire, no matter how loud, couldn't burn that away. Up to this point, the auditorium at Harvard had felt like a courtroom argument's volleyed lines drawn, and the crowd choosing sides with every clap or groan. Karoline Leavitt's still unwavering strength had begun to reshape the energy in the room. Anna Kasparian's sharp defiance had started to look less certain. But no one, absolutely no one, expected what came next. From the third row near the center aisle, a student slowly rose to his feet. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't wearing political colors. He was dressed simply, a dark green hoodie, jeans, and a small cross around his neck. He looked young, barely 20. But his voice, shaky, thick with emotion, cut through the theater like a hymn through silence. I lost my mom last year, he said. She was only 40 keys. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even the cameras froze. She fought cancer for 3 years. I read every book, asked every doctor. I believed in science. But when she died, all of that knowledge, it didn't help. It didn't comfort me. His voice cracked. Nothing did. Not the theories. Not the data. So I want to ask you both, when nothing makes sense, when the pain doesn't go away, what do you hold on to? The air changed. This wasn't a debate point. It was a cry from a wounded soul. And it broke through the polish of the event, like sunlight through a cathedral window. Anna Kasparian, usually quick on her feet, seemed momentarily stunned. She looked at the young man, then quickly looked away. Her arms, previously crossed tightly, slowly relaxed. She blinked twice, visibly searching for the right words. I believe in people, she said carefully. In healing through knowledge, through progress. It wasn't unkind, but it wasn't complete either. Her answer hung in the air but didn't land. It was like trying to hug someone with an email. Karoline turned to the student. She didn't reach for applause. She didn't perform. She simply spoke, and for the first time that evening, her voice carried something deeper than confidence. It carried compassion. I'm so sorry for your loss. she said, her tone low and personal. "I can't imagine that kind of pain." She paused. Then she looked directly at him, eyes steady, heart open. "I believe in the one who catches every tear." Psalm 56:8. "You have kept count of my tossings. Put my tears in your bottle." Silence, not awkward, not forced, but sacred. Even those who didn't believe, who had clapped for Anna minutes before, now sat motionless. Because this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about grief, about love, about the kind of pain that visits every human life sooner or later. And Karoline wasn't selling answers. She was offering what so many forget to bring into public debates: presence. A few seats down, an older woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A young man in a Harvard sweatshirt gently lowered his phone, as if realizing some moments aren't meant to be recorded. They're meant to be remembered. Anna shifted in her seat again. Not out of defiance this time, but discomfort. Not because she had been beaten, but because something had been revealed that, when stripped of ideologies, we all come face to face with the same human question. Where do we go when nothing else works? Whoopi Goldberg didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her eyes, normally sharp and full of commentary, were softer now. She looked at the young man, then back to Karoline, then down at her notes, as if even the seasoned host had just witnessed something real, something unteachable. The Harvard auditorium had started the night divided by belief background and worldview, but in that moment, however brief, they were united by one thing: loss. And in that shared space of pain, it wasn't logic that offered comfort. It was the quiet assurance that maybe, just maybe, there is a God who sees our tears even when the world keeps scrolling. Karoline sat back in her chair. She didn't look triumphant. She looked grateful. And the young man who had spoken, the one who cracked the whole room open, sat down slowly. His eyes still wet, but his shoulders lighter. For the first time since the event began, no one spoke. No one needed to, because sometimes the question itself is the turning point. And sometimes, silence is the most honest answer of all. The debate was over. The lights in the Harvard auditorium dimmed. The banners were taken down. The seats once divided by belief now sat empty and quiet. But the real impact of that evening was just beginning. Back in her hotel room, Anna Kasparian sat alone. No crew, no audience, no applause. The makeup had been wiped clean, the blazer folded over a chair. Outside her window, the city of Boston moved like normal. But inside her room, something was unsettled. Something was different. She opened her laptop. Notifications flooded in thousands of mentions, headlines, clips, opinions from every angle. One video was trending fast, a close-up of Karoline Leavitt, her voice calm, quoting Psalm 56:8 to a grieving student. "You have kept count of my tossings. Put my tears in your bottle." That moment had gone viral. The hashtags were everywhere. Karoline speaks. Faith is not fairy tale. Harvard moment. But Anna wasn't reading them for validation. She scrolled slowly, her eyes scanning faces, captions, comments, most from people she didn't know. Many from people who didn't know her. Some praised her. Some mocked her. Some said she lost. Some said she won. But she wasn't asking that question anymore. Then, nestled among the flood of reactions, was an email. No press inquiry, no interview request. Just a subject line that stopped her cold. "I used to be you. Sarah." She hesitated. For a moment, she thought it might be hate mail, or worse, some religious pitch disguised as empathy. But something about that line, it wasn't loud. It wasn't clever. It was human. She clicked. The message was plain. No bold fonts, no dramatic greetings. Just a quiet testimony from someone who had walked through fire. Hi, Anna. I watched the debate tonight. I wasn't planning to, but a friend sent it to Baumbo. I'm not writing to criticize you. I'm writing because I know where you're standing, because I once stood there too. I was raised an atheist. My parents were scientists. I believed in logic-proof structure. I thought faith was for the uneducated, the emotionally weak. Then cancer took my daughter, and all the logic I clung to collapsed. I tried to rebuild myself with facts, routine support groups. None of it held. Nothing could explain the depth of the hole inside me. Nothing until someone handed me a Bible, not to argue with me, not to convert me, but just to offer hope. One verse changed everything. John 8:32, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Faith didn't erase my pain. It gave it meaning. It let me breathe again. I don't write to preach. I just want you to know there is another kind of truth, one that reason alone can't carry. Sarah. Anna read it once, then again, then a third time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, wanting to reply, then paused, then moved away. Her hand trembled not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in a long time, being pierced not by accusation, but by understanding. This wasn't a political attack. This wasn't a call to debate. It was a lifeline tossed from someone who had already drowned and surfaced. Anna closed her laptop, but the email remained open in her mind. She stood by the window, looking out at the city, but seeing something else. She thought of the student who had asked the unanswerable question. What do you hold on to when the pain doesn't go away? She had dismissed it at the time, defaulting to knowledge to progress. But now she didn't know. She remembered Karoline's answer, not loud, not rehearsed, just real. I believe in the one who catches every tear. For the first time in years, Anna felt something she couldn't quantify. It wasn't conversion. It wasn't confession. But it was curiosity. And for a woman who made her living answering hard questions, curiosity was the first crack in the wall. Back on her nightstand, her phone lit up again. Another email. Another offer to appear on a panel and defend her side. She ignored it. Then her eyes fell back on the email from Sarah. She opened her browser. Typed slowly. John 8:32 meaning. An article popped up from a Christian grief site. Another from a university theology department. She didn't click either. She just stared at the verse. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Free. She wasn't ready to believe, but she was no longer sure what she didn't believe, and that was new. The next morning, she didn't tell her producer, didn't go on social media. She just wrote one sentence on a notepad next to her bed. I still believe in reason. But maybe I'm learning to listen. The firestorm came quickly. Within hours of the Harvard debate ending, the entire country seemed to be talking. Not just about abortion or the role of faith in politics, but about that moment. The moment Karoline Leavitt looked a grieving student in the eye and said, "I believe in the one who catches every tear." It wasn't just a quote. It became a cultural line in the sand. Social media exploded, but not with the usual noise. This time, the noise had meaning. The country didn't just watch this debate, they entered it. And soon, the headlines started pouring in. The Daily Wire ran a bold banner. Karoline Leavitt turned Harvard into a revival tent. MSNBC fired back with a scathing headline. Dangerous religious infiltration at elite universities. Across cable networks, the usual faces debated everything from church-state boundaries to whether Karoline had won or grandstanded. But the woman at the center of the storm stayed silent. Karoline Leavitt wasn't posting, wasn't taking calls from primetime hosts, wasn't making the rounds on Fox or Newsmax, despite being begged to do so. Instead, 3 days after the debate, she quietly walked into a small brick church in rural New Hampshire. No cameras, no stage lights, just folding chairs, wood paneling, and about 30 people who had known her since before she entered politics. She didn't wear a blazer. No makeup team followed her in. She took the mic in her hand, paused, and spoke softly. "I've been asked to go on television, to defend what I said, to declare some kind of victory." She shook her head gently, but faith isn't a weapon. It's a whisper, and even whispers can move mountains. The room was silent, reverent. A few older women nodded. One man in the back wiped his glasses. For many, her words weren't political, they were personal. Meanwhile, Anna Kasparian, the sharp, confident media figure who once mocked faith as a fairy tale, didn't offer any public rebuttal. She didn't double down. She didn't go on The View or post a video breakdown of the event. Instead, she disappeared for a moment. And then, 3 days after the debate, Anna posted a single sentence on X, formerly Twitter. No hashtags, no images, just 12 quiet words that stunned both her critics and followers. I don't believe, but I've started reading. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a surrender. But for those paying attention, it was a shift, a crack in the wall that had once seemed impenetrable. Conservative media pounced. Liberal outlets hesitated. But the post wasn't for them. It was personal, raw, a signal that something deeper than debate had taken place. Anna never said what she was reading, but some guessed. The email from Sarah, the Bible verse from Karoline, John 8:32. "The truth will set you free." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Because sometimes the most powerful conversations are the ones we have with ourselves. Back in New Hampshire, Karoline declined every invitation to capitalize on the moment. She didn't build a brand off the debate. She didn't sell a book. She didn't post a victory thread. She prayed. She walked along the river near her hometown, sat with her parents at dinner, and at night, she opened her Bible, not to find new arguments, but to anchor herself again in the one who gave her the words to begin with. And while the nation bickered over whether she won, Karoline never claimed victory. Her only post was short and quiet. Faith wasn't given to silence others. It was given to carry the broken. In the days that followed, more unexpected voices spoke up. Professors, nurses, retired military, chaplains, even atheists, some agreeing with Anna, resonating with Karoline. But what they all had in common was this: they had listened. Not shouted, not scrolled. Listened. And for an America worn thin by outrage that meant something. It had been a month since the Harvard debate. The headlines had faded. The hashtags slowed. The noise of public reaction, like every storm in modern America, eventually quieted. But not everything disappeared. Some things, quiet things, had taken root. Inside the historic Widener Library, a soft hush blanketed the stone walls and heavy bookshelves. No cameras, no lectures, just the soft rustle of pages and the tapping of keys. It was a regular weekday afternoon, ordinary in every way, until something small happened. A young woman no older than 20 walked down a narrow aisle. She wore no political slogans, no visible faith symbols, just a backpack and a look of quiet curiosity. Her eyes scanned the row of religious texts, skipping over thick theological tomes until they paused hesitant, venture on a worn copy of the New Testament. She pulled it from the shelf, held it a moment, then sat down at a small wooden table tucked beside a stained glass window. No one noticed. No one needed to. She wasn't Anna Kasparian. She was someone else. But the ripple had reached her. Somewhere between the moment Karoline Leavitt quoted Psalm 56:8 to a grieving student and the email from Sarah that reached Anna in a quiet hotel room, something had changed. Not loudly, not overnight, but something had sparked. As the girl opened the Bible and began to read, a soft voice echoed not in the room, but through the screen for those watching at home. It was Karoline's voice, drawn from a quiet interview she had agreed to for a small-town New Hampshire church broadcast, a voiceover paired with the imagery now appearing on screen. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Hebrews 11:1. The camera slowly faded from the girl at the library to a different place entirely, a wooden church sanctuary in rural America. Sunlight filtered through the windows. Pews stood empty. The only movement was Karoline herself, sitting quietly on a bench near the altar. Alone, no script, no microphone, just stillness. She bowed her head. "Lord," she whispered, "is me not to win arguments, but to plant seeds." There was no applause, no final confrontation, no dramatic triumph, only prayer. Because that was all she had ever been trying to do, not to defeat someone like Anna, not to trend online, but to speak truth and let it land where it was needed most. The screen lingered on her folded hands, then slowly faded to black. Not with fanfare, but with reverence. And somewhere out there, in a church, a home, a dorm room, or maybe even another library, someone else picked up that same book. Not because they were convinced, not because they converted, but because they were curious. And sometimes, that's all it takes. A spark, not a flame, but a spark that refuses to go out. In a world full of shouting, sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that doesn't raise itself. This story reminds us that faith doesn't always come with thunder. It often arrives as a whisper. Karoline Leavitt didn't win by overpowering her opponent. She simply stood firm in what she believed, answered with grace, and let truth speak for itself. And somehow that quiet conviction touched a generation that often tunes out anything loud. The lesson here is timeless. When the world feels divided and angry, you don't have to match its volume. You just have to hold on to your values patiently, consistently, and with compassion. Faith isn't about winning arguments. It's about planting seeds, even when you can't see the results right away. And for those of us who've walked longer roads in life, we know this to be true. The seeds you plant today may bloom in someone's heart years later. If this message touched your heart, share your thoughts below. What's one moment in your life where quiet strength made all the difference? Leave it a comment. Subscribe for more stories that bring light instead of noise, and share this video to keep the conversation going.